Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Can everybody hear okay? I tend to scream a little bit, so. Great, my name is Diana Paez, and I am from the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan. We are a nonprofit research and consulting organization working to support businesses and innovators in low and middle income countries across different sectors. I lead our work on energy and mobility, and I'm currently working with the state government of Chihuahua, Fernando, representative and main counterpart,
thank you,
on developing a roadmap to electrification for the state of Chihuahua. So very, very exciting times. And so I'm thrilled to be hosting these panelists today. I think it's going to be a great discussion. Thank you so much for making the time to come here. I know that competition is fierce out there for the other panels as well. So I'm going to go ahead and briefly introduce our experts. I could speak about their expertise, very relevant expertise for hours, but I'm going to keep it short. First, Fernando, right here, is the Undersecretary for Mining, Industry, and Energy for the state of Chihuahua. He previously worked as a consultant, executive, and partner for private sector companies in the aerospace, electronics, and automotive industry. And right now, as Undersecretary, he is working to promote and facilitate the state's economic development and competitiveness. So please welcome Fernando.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have to do a round of applause for every person, so thank you for that. Patricia Baires next. She is the Business Development Manager at Blink Charging and brings over 12 years of experience as a sales and marketing professional in the automotive industry. At Blink, she has led the development of hundreds of charging ports with high-level clients across LATAM and opened the doors for commercial partnerships in new countries such as Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, and Argentina. She continues to lead the development of new business within the region, and it's great to have you here today, Patricia. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please. Thank you. So next we have Edward Hightower. He is the CEO of Lordstown Motors Corporation, an EV design and manufacturing company that is revolutionizing the way work gets done. He's based in Michigan with a plant in Ohio as well. And he previously served in several new product development, engineering, marketing, and senior executive roles in Ford, BMW, and GM. So he's a veteran of the automotive industry, also a published author. He wrote the book, Motoring Africa, Sustainable Automotive Industrialization, that offers an actionable roadmap for building sustainable manufacturing businesses in 6 of the 54 countries in Africa. Thank you so much for being here today, Edward.
Thank you.
Next, we have Juan Carlos Rodriguez Villava, is the Innovation and New Ventures Vice President at Dalton Corporation, a diversified industrial group founded more than 75 years ago, with different divisions, including automotive, financial, and real estate. Dalton provides leasing and credit services to auto consumers and currently serves 5 major automobile brands, including Toyota, Honda, Volkswagen, Chrysler, and Suzuki. Juan Carlos brings very relevant experience from both public and private sector. Thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, we have Neva Zhang. She is the sales director of BYD Mexico and lead for Central America and the Caribbean as well. BYD was founded in 1995. It's a Chinese company, global leader on EV sales as of mid-2022. Neva has a lot of experience leading multiple initiatives to support the transition to electrification in countries such as Costa Rica, the Bahamas, and Panama, among others. Thank you so much for being here as well. Great. So I'm eager to dig in and hear from our panelists. I just want to share just really briefly why this panel and why this topic. And at WDI, we wanted to organize this discussion because of all of the recent growth, I would say, in terms of the transition to electrification and how important the topic is becoming. And just a few things to share with you. As many of you, of course, know, while EV adoption still is very, very small globally, the transition to production of EVs is a reality now, with automakers around the world setting commitments to electrify their products over the next 3 to 7 to 10 years, and with all of the different, very ambitious government targets and policies as well that are being set in place in different places. In the US, where I'm based, as an example, the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act is effectively supercharging the EV transition in terms of the production side of things, providing lots of incentives and pushing to create this supply chain for electric vehicles in North America. This, of course, brings opportunities for Mexico and for Canada, and also for other markets as well. It is a very, I think, tremendous shift for the industry, and the purpose of this panel discussion is really to delve a little bit into it. So thank you again. And Fernando, you are the lucky one. I will start with you. You're welcome. So if you could please share a little bit with us about what this transition means for a state with automotive manufacturing capacity like Chihuahua, and what were the motivations that push you to develop a strategy at the state level.
Okay, thank you, Anna. First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel and share this stage with these personalities. So for us, for our state, it's really important to, let's say, transition to electromobility. Right now, over 20% of our exports are related to automotive companies based in our state, and over 43% of our labor workforce related to manufacturing is dependent upon automotive. So really, as you mentioned before, even though as we are moving, let's say, little by little on this transition, for us it's very important that the more than 400 companies already established in our state, let's say, work with them to help them make this transition. So what we are seeing in the last 3-4 years is that there has been a change. There has been a change on the investment in the, let's say, in the U.S. between ICEs and electric cars, let's say. So in the past, the bulk of the investment was on, let's say, regular combustion cars. So right now we are seeing that most of this investment is on electric vehicles. So right now the difference is huge. On the last 3 years, the investment on electric vehicles and the supply chain is around $80 billion. And just $13 billion on the US and the TEMEC zone. So this is a kind of a challenge, because so far Mexico has been out of this trend, and all the investment has been either, in the US there are basically two belts, one in the southeast, southwest, another one of a triangle between Alabama, North Carolina, Ohio, Michigan, and we haven't got these investments. So for us, it's extremely important to work in a proactive way to try to make this transition, work with the companies, and bring the investment in the new technology on the electromobility. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. That's great. I would love to actually move to Edward and just ask you, considering your experience, working with different OEMs for internal combustion engine vehicles in the past, and then now at the helm of an EV startup such as Lordstown Motors, if you could talk a little bit about what that kind of shift means, what you see associated with that, and what your specific product seeks to solve for at Lordstown Motors.
Yes, no, thank you, Deanna, and thank you for having me here. It's great to be back in Mexico. My first time back since COVID, and first time back in Mexico City in the last maybe 7 years or so, so it's great to be back. At Lordstown, our mission is to accelerate the adoption towards electric vehicles by focusing on the commercial fleet segment. Our first product, the Endurance, is a full-size pickup truck, full battery electric. Think about the size of a Ford F-150, and it's full battery electric. As a matter of fact, if you Google Lordstown Motors, or if you look on PR Newswire, you'll see that we announced this morning that we've started commercial production of the truck in Ohio, and we look forward to delivering it in the fourth quarter. So it's exciting to be here and share that with you today. So compared to the other OEMs, as Diana asked, I would say it's exciting to be at the helm of a company that is in a key role in driving that transition towards electrification. Because one, there are many benefits to the customer. Total cost of ownership typically is better with an EV than with an internal combustion engine vehicle. And our commercial fleet customers, they value that very much. They look at the total cost of the energy, the cost of maintenance, the replacement value, and all of those factors. EVs tend to be better than internal combustion engine vehicles. And also the data shows that customers who switch over to EVs tend to stay with EVs because they like the user experience better. So it's exciting to be a part of that. And by focusing on the commercial fleet business, we're really focusing on the vehicles that drive the most. So most people who are consumers and have their own vehicles, the vehicle stays parked 95% of the time. When you're at home asleep or when you're at work, the vehicle is parked. But commercial vehicles, the commercial fleet space, they're driving they're not sitting parked 90% of the time. They're driving 60% of the time. So the uptime is much greater, and we have a greater impact on the transition away from gasoline or diesel miles to electric miles by focusing on that segment.
Thank you so much, Edward.
Sure.
So in terms of another OEM perspective, I could move to Neva. Neva, you're very far from me, but I can see you. So BYD, as I was saying, right now it's the world's leading seller of EVs. And the company has been making both in terms of fully electric and also plug-in, batteries as well. Now you're working in Mexico, and I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about some of the trends you're seeing, and as well as opportunities in this market and how you're going about those.
Thank you, Diana. Hola a todos. Hello, everyone. I'm from BYD. So as most of you may already know, we are a very famous and leading car company for new energy cars in the industry, in the world. And we are a very young company, and we decided to start from the very beginning to invest in the future for EV penetration. So we are right now seeing in the world that several countries, they are seeing a very significant growth on the EV penetration rate. We see China, for sure, we see US, and we see Norway, among others. So we are just participating into this trend to also lead, make something different in the new industry. As for Mexico, we have been here as BYD for almost 8 to 9 years already. And we knew that Mexico is a very mature car industry. And we are producing 3 million cars a year and 2 million for exportation and 1 million for Mexican industry. So we are seeing small changes in the industry right now for EV penetration. So we decided to invest in the future instead of waiting to the phone to call us to enter into Mexico. So talking about the OEMs, right now in the industry, we are seeing that several and many OEMs, we are all starting to investigate and develop the EVs to accommodate to the new trend of the industry. We are a relatively young company, and right now we have already changed ourselves into a totally new energy car brand. We only have EVs and PHEVs. This year we're selling like the top one in the NEV sales in the industry, and in China is the major market for us for this sales volume. This year in China we are selling more than 1 million new energy cars, EVs and plug-in hybrids. So I'm very excited to be in this forum today and to talk and share and exchange ideas with everyone here about this new trend in the industry. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Neva. Okay, so moving on to, if we think about the distribution side of things, and I love that each of you sort of represents one of the different parts of the value chains around this, and is seeing some of these implications and changes. And Juan Carlos, I would love to hear on your end of the things how you are at Dalton thinking about some of this transition or these changes? Are there any specific strategies that you're starting to think about, given, again, the pace of, adoption still slow, but in terms of production and what is coming down the line as well? So if you could share about your work at Dalton and how you're thinking about those things, that would be great.
Sure, Diana, thank you so much. And thank you so much for the invitation. At Dalton, we're proud to be one of the top retail groups of automobiles in Mexico. And we really, really believe that this has been created by listening to the market. So for us, it's important, and we're so happy to be invited, Diana, and the rest of the coordinating team, because we really want to hear, and all our philosophy has been done to really understand what the customer wants. And we believe that the North American market is a very important market for the industry. Of course, not the biggest one, because you have huge markets such as China, but it's definitely one of the markets that it's the most avant-garde in terms of trends. So you see a variability in very different parts of North America of what the customer is really wanting. Dalton is a true North American company, born in Mexico, but already establishing other operations north of the border, not on the auto side, but on other of our divisions. And the key point for this, Diana, is that we believe that it's always important to keep the customer at the center. It's not the same thing to think about an EV market for the whole globe. Even if we're seeing that the trends of sales in terms of EVs to internal combustion engines is going to switch in the world by 2040, what I've been reading is that by 2040, there's going to be more EVs sold in the world than internal combustion engines. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen in an homogeneous way in the different markets. So our job as a retailer, our job is to be very close to each of the consumers in the different parts of North America to understand really what is going to be the need in the different places that our customers are. It's not the same thing to talk about California than to talk about Mexico City, and we're all North America. The trends are not the same. It's not the same to talk about Texas than to talk about Tapachula. So for us, really the idea and what we're seeing, Diana, is that we're adapting. We're working with the OEMs in giving them all the feedback that we have from the customer to prepare for this new stage in the automobile industry, but always keeping the customer first and understanding the needs in every region that they are.
Okay.
So important.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Yeah, I'll come back to you with some follow-up question after we hear from Patricia as well. So Patricia, we were talking a little bit about this over lunch as we move into greater uptake. There's all of this, of course, interrelationship. You work in the charging infrastructure side of things, the chargers. You have to work, of course, with government, with different sectors. At Blink, in charging, by the way, as many of you know, is one of the three main, I suppose, hurdles that we talk about in terms of EV adoption, along with range and cost. So how are you, what's your work like at Blink specifically, and what's your strategy, just broadly speaking, as you work in the market here in Mexico and LATAM as well?
Of course. Well, I'm from Blink Charging. We are a U.S. company. We already have 13 years of experience believing in EV sector. We already have 25, we operate in 25 countries. 7 of them are in Latin America. Latin America is working faster and growing faster than we already seen before. We are trying to keep to Mexico and the rest of the countries in Latin America our experiences, because we know that our countries are not preparing for EV mobility. We need to increase our electrical infrastructure, and we are creating new business model where we, as a Blink Charging, that we are a vertical integrated company. We have our hardware and software that allows us to monetize the time of the charging or the kilowatts that we send or we give to the automobiles. So we create different business model where we as a Blink give the hardware and provide the software to work and move faster with the different infrastructure that we need in different countries.
Wonderful. And what kind of response are you seeing now in the market here in Mexico in terms of that? Growth?
Mexico, it's moving really faster, more than we thought maybe 6 months ago. You are in Mexico moving really fast in the fleet adoptions and the last mile regarding the cards. You are in Mexico are moving faster in the fleet size.
Okay, I'm wondering if Neva, you agree with that kind of assessment, or where are you guys seeing most of the growth?
Yeah, for sure. So for Mexico, we have been haven't opened to public as yet as BYD, but we've been having our presence with a lot of fleet customers, such as if you live in Mexico City, you may see BYD or taxis on the road. So we have in total 1,500 taxis, and also we are operating together with our clients, with our partner called Bemo, the charging infrastructures for this fleet. Because in Mexico right now, to be honest, I'm seeing we are still in the first stage of infrastructure and EV penetration. So we are also making our own efforts. And also together with a lot of other big groups, we have our electric trucks in operation. And we are having a very good feedback from the customers. So yeah, we are very passionate to this transaction of the industry. Yeah.
Okay, that's great to hear. And I think you touched on a few things that have to go right, so to speak, so that this can continue to grow. And I wonder if each of you, I would love for you to share, what might be top 2 or 3 hurdles that you see for your own company or organization to grow as you think about the market. And we can start with you again, Neva, and then just come down the line.
Yes, thank you, Diana. So about this question, I think my answer would be right now we have been investing into this transaction in Mexico for a long time, for 8 years already. And we knew from the very beginning that Mexico is a very important market in LATAM in a strategic way. So we are hoping that we can make something different into this transaction in the industry in Mexico. And right now, we are planning also to open to public for next year. And we are talking with, for next year in public, you're going to see BYD as well. Just a little bit of notice. Yeah.
Surprises to come.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So on our end, I would tell you that there's 2 different markets in North America. What's going on in Mexico, I would say in the retail and next to the customer. What's happening in Mexico and what's happening in North America. And what I can tell you is that what happened in Mexico, I think that as Neva pointed out, we're still at a very early stage. But you also see a lot of trend right now from the market that this is something that the people want. Young generations are striving towards EVs. All the OEMs that we work with, they already have a setup line in motion, at least on hybrid vehicles. Hybrid vehicles right now have a much more economic sense in this particular stage of time for the broader public in Mexico. However, we believe that there's also a growing but very small percentage of niche market coming to the electric vehicles, and that's why we see the footprint of new brands that have such a good establishment in terms of EVs. North America is a completely different story, and I think that North America has many sides to it as well. You see very mature markets in terms of motors such as California, but it also has its challenges because California, I don't know if you were aware, but there was a heat wave in California 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, and they were asking for people to stop charging their cars because the grid had some problems in terms of charging. So I believe that it's not only listening to the market, but making sure that everybody in the supply chain, including policymakers, generate the conditions for the customer to really think that it's a good decision to go to an electric vehicle or a hybrid. So I would say the trend is there. People want to move in that direction, but it has to make sense in every single way, from the ability to get the power from the grid and the cost of doing so, to having all the regulations that will allow us to actually, and the cost even of the vehicle for every one of the, I would say, populations that we're targeting to. That's what I think, Diana.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, it is clear that there is an adoption gap. There's a gap. I love what you said about it being so local and localized as well. And you know, it goes hand in hand with how the energy sector, et cetera, is organized and structured as well. So Edward, on your end, yeah.
You know, I'd like to answer that by doing a bit of audience participation, if you don't mind.
I would love that.
How many of you in this room, there are about 60 people in this room, how many of you own an electric vehicle and drive one every day? Raise your hand if you do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's it.
6 out of 60, right? Is that about right? So that's about 10%. It's an automotive focus group, focused panel, so you expect the index is a little bit higher. So I would say 3 things: price, familiarity or trial, and then infrastructure. I think those are the 3 things to drive adoption. What will help price are several of the incentives that are out there for people to purchase an EV, and the fact that the cost of batteries, which is the largest cost driver of building, you know, being on the product development and manufacturing side, that's the largest cost driver, is the cost of batteries. So as that battery cost comes down and incentives help, that helps with the price piece as more people try the vehicle out, because I think awareness is becoming pretty high now, especially with all the incentives. And then third, infrastructure, charging infrastructure, things that, you know, Patricia is going to fix. or okay, of the 6 of you, all right, we'll go back to you. How many of you charge your vehicle in your home? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 out of the 6 of us charge our vehicles at home. I charge my vehicle at home every night. I have 0 range anxiety because I plug in and I forget about it. The next day, I have, you know, I only charge my vehicle to maybe 90% of state of charge because I want to protect the battery for a long time. And I rarely worry about it. And when I go long distances, you know, I'm confident in the charging infrastructure that I have in the United States. So price, trial, infrastructure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Patricia, on your end. You're fixing all the charging infrastructure
issues.
issues.
Yes, fixing infrastructure.
So that's great. Thank you in advance. What do you need?
Here in Mexico, the plans really, at the end of the 2022, we are trying to have at least 100 new points in Mexico to fix and help the OEMs to increase the number of the vehicle sales here in Mexico. And for us, one of the difficult things that we found is the electrical infrastructure that we need to make the chargers work correctly. So, and it depends of the zone of Mexico. The different taxes that we have to pay are really high if we compare with other countries. So I think in Mexico especially, we need to work with the different laws to see and found how the way we are going to go lowest with the taxes, and maybe we can have a table work to find how we are going to help Mexico to go lower with the taxes. And I think it's going to help with everybody, the OEMs, the company that works with charging station, because we have to import as many chargers we can from US. So I think it's one of the barriers that we have right now in Mexico.
Yeah, and I understand that there are multiple efforts actually now in Mexico at the national level to work on a roadmap to e-mobility, and a lot of discussion around policy, infrastructure, et cetera, been also happening. So it seems like it's a good time to remind us of that. Thank you. Fernando, so in your case, again, we think a little bit more about the suppliers, about the companies that are participating in the value chain, and how they are kind of looking at that. As a state government, you're trying to help them transition, position themselves. What are the main hurdles that you see?
Yes, well, first of all, we are seeing an inflection point in everything related to mobility. And there is like a paradigm shift in what it used to be a traditional system to what we are seeing right with the EV system. I'll share with the audience some of the things that we are seeing right now. And as you well know, some of the gentlemen that are here with me today, we've been working on this before. But as we've been trying to lure investment to our region, to our state, the requirements for the companies coming down to Mexico is quite different to what it used to be before. In the past, let's say, we could set up a automotive, company with, let's say, 25,000 square feet, 1,000, 2,000 people, minimum energy requirements, water, things like that. Mm-hmm. So right now, it's absolutely different. Right now, we are seeing, first of all, that they require big extensions of land, 100 hectares, 200 hectares, up to 500 hectares. Mm-hmm. On the second things that we are seeing is that the energy requirements are just so different to what it used to be before. Right now, let's say a company that wants to come to our state requires, just for this facility, around 150 megawatts. Just to put in perspective, the state of Chihuahua consumes, or produces, better said, around 4,000 gigawatts. So let's say one plant consumes 115 megawatts. And this is a real kind of a challenge, because right now the infrastructure in our state, and I will say throughout Mexico, is not ready to support this kind of operations. Mm-hmm. And also I will say that this is just for one company. So we are working right now in some other projects that each project requires between 100 or 200 megawatts. And in addition to that, they have the mandate to add renewable energy. So what we are seeing right now is also is not just energy, but it's also, reliable energy and renewable energy, up to 75 megawatts of solar panels or whatever we can help them. So I will say also that there is a big challenge on the, let's say, requirements for the labor workforce that is already trying to move into EV on the DV ecosystem. They require better training. They require new careers that we are not prepared. At this point, we are not ready, let's say, to give them. Our state produces around 6,000 engineers. And this is a very small fraction of what we are requiring right now. So I will say the challenges that we are facing are basically on three levels. One is at the federal level, one is at the state level, and the other one is at the municipal level. I will go a little bit on the detail on that, but let's say that the companies are coming here, or better say, let me put it this way. We are competing against states, maybe Ed knows better than myself, but the states in the US, Ohio, Carolina, Kentucky, they are offering incentive packages of between $3,000 billion up to $5,000 billion. And for us, trying to lure a company that has this kind of incentives. And on top of that, you add the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Act, the Infrastructure Act, the whatever act is in the US already. That put us on a disadvantage, let's say, to bring these companies. So I will say that that we need to work very closely between the private sector and the government sector at the three levels of government, because we need federal incentives. What they are requiring from us are an accelerated reduction of assets that are bringing to our country. They want a reduction on the income tax. They want zero, let's say, value-added tax. Also, they require free land. They require a whole, I mean, we are also seeing that we even require a new cogeneration plant in our state to give them the energy that they need. So really it's a big challenge. So I leave it at that because some of the questions ahead of us will address some of the answers that we have for this challenge that we are seeing. But I will leave the audience with the idea that the things that we are seeing right now, and I will say that Chihuahua is at the forefront of this new frontier in electromobility and investment, is that we need to work together, not just in our state, but between U.S. and Mexico. And we need to work together with the governments in both sides of the either U.S. and Mexico to even Canada, and that we really need to rethink what kind of infrastructure we need in our country, because this is a must in order to bring the companies to Mexico.
Yeah, I love that you touched on some of those needs when we think about investment and what it takes to again work with companies, what they're looking for in that ecosystem. And I wonder if, Edward, I can put you on the spot a little bit, and not only as Lordstown, and you have your own plant and a very interesting business model that would be great if you share more about that, but also as you were as part of your book that you wrote in Africa, you were really looking at what is needed to be able to develop this capacity. So if you think about EVs, like what would be some of those takeaways based on your work there?
Right. Yes. So the education, as Fernando mentioned, is definitely important. The supply chain is a key driver as well. Most OEMs would like their supply base to be local. I mean, COVID and further emphasized that in supply chain constraints around the world. But if you think about it, if you're shipping components across the seas, you're adding frequent flyer miles to all the parts that go into a vehicle. So if the components are produced locally, as they're doing in Chihuahua and focusing on growing that, that's only more attractive to the OEMs as you look at the income statement of a vehicle and you look at the material cost, you look at the freight cost, you look at the logistics, you look at the warranty from parts that need to be returned. All of those cost elements determine, what was that thing we talked about, price. That determines the cost of the vehicle, which is a driver of the price and adoption. So having a local supply chain, building a workforce that can support that local supply chain are key fundamental elements. And then that helps drive OEM interest in building in that area, especially if it's near a sizable market or a market of sizable opportunity. So I would say those are key things. The public-private partnerships with the government to be able to enable the infrastructure to have the elements of production there and education there. Those are key parts as well.
Yeah, thank you. You touched on supply chain, and I just want to delve a little bit deeper there. Obviously, it's at the forefront of the agenda. There are some bottlenecks already identified, and we observe that depending on the company, there are different ways of going about it, and trying to secure capture another part of the value chain through partnerships, etc. I know that, and I would love to hear from Neva and then you, Edward, as well. So for BYD, you produce your own batteries. That's one way to when you can be vertically integrated. I would love to hear more about your thinking there, and then hear from Edward about how the type of partnership that you have as well that allows you to work that through those challenges that most people or companies are experiencing right now.
Right, so talking about supply chain issue, I think everybody in the industry, we know that especially starting from the pandemic, we are seeing kind of a difficulty for supply chain issue. But as for BYD, we have a vertical production. We have every core component for EV in our own technology and in our own production, such as the power battery, such as the electromotor, such as the transmission. And also, we also produce our own microchips. So that's why we can still secure our delivery despite all the supply chain issues right now in the industry. So we are confident still for BYD as for maintain this vertical production and to be able to secure the delivery once we're open to Mexico and also other countries. to supply the demands of our end customers.
So I believe what Deanna was referring to. So with Lordstown Motors, late last year, we made the decision to switch to an asset-light business model. We sold our assembly plant in Ohio to Foxconn, the global consumer electronics manufacturer. It was a 6.5 million square foot plant that could build up to 400,000 vehicles per year. And as a smaller OEM, it was difficult or cost prohibitive to fill all of that plant ourselves. So by selling it to Foxconn, we now made our manufacturing cost a variable cost because they have an ambition of growing their business in the electric vehicle space, not just by assembling vehicles, but becoming part of the supply chain. They're already part of the supply chain in Mexico for some vehicle components, but they plan to grow that as part of their mission to grow in the EV space. So in addition to selling the plant to Foxconn and forming an agreement for them to assemble the Endurance for us, which is our pickup truck that we're just announced we're in commercial production for, we formed a joint venture with Foxconn where we jointly will together we will develop future electric vehicle products together using the Foxconn EV ecosystem. So their ability to build power electronics, their ability to source batteries, their ability to source other components that are key. It allows smaller OEMs like Lordstown and some of the others that will be built in Ohio and other Foxconn plants around the world to gain scale at lower volumes, because we're sharing more components in the supply chain, we're sharing common architectures, common designs, and that just allows the customer to have more choice at lower costs and lower prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that has a lot of potential, as we're seeing already. I'm curious now, since we're talking about this type of partnerships, if there are new partnerships or different partnerships that for Juan Carlos and Patricia, at Link and at Dalton, that you're also seeing the need to develop as well, to be able to grow in this space. Juan Carlos?
Sure. I think that everything related to, and again going to that customer centricity that I was talking about, the market is changing and they are wanting for different things, and they are having an experience that is compared to many different industries. Mm-hmm. So that creates the need for us to be much more technological savvy, be much more innovative in order. We see these guys that are doing a fantastic job in terms of creating new products. Mm-hmm. But we also have to figure out new ways of having a better user experience and selling them and market them to our consumers. So I think that we're already seeing a lot of changes in the digital, I would say, market area ever since the pandemic. We're seeing a lot of shifts in the culture of acquiring vehicles. So that has forced us to be very open to create new ventures and create new lines of communications. Perhaps we would not have the opportunity to discuss putting chargers in some of our dealerships. Now it's a need that we're going to have. Because most of the OEMs are going to have an EV vehicle, so it now becomes very important to have those new items for our customer. Yep. So I think that this is a very fun time to be around, because we're seeing such a structural changes in how things are going on. But in the end, it all comes down to one thing: what the customer wants and what the experience you're going to give them to deliver it. And I think that everybody is part of responsible to doing so, because we're in the last trench of actually getting there. And some of the OEMs said that, no, I'm going to market them directly. Some of the others said, no, we need your expertise in that personal contact that you have with your customers to keep this going. We don't have that expertise. So I think that there's a lot new ideas are going to come, not only on the product side, but also on what everybody has to do in the industry and in the retail side to be more efficient in this item.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Right now, as Juan Carlos said, the market is changing a lot. we are more open to see different way to increase electromobility in Mexico and Latin America. That's why Blink is creating new business model to help the government side, the public and the private side to believe in EV, to believe that in 3 or 4 years ahead, we are going to have good numbers of vehicles running on the streets. So Mexico, it's really open to make this change. I think Mexico is going to be in a good way in 3 or 4 years ahead. And of course, we need partners like the OEMs, the private side and the public side also.
Yeah. And I want to follow up on that a little bit, because we talked about the workforce part of it, and for each of you, and there's a lot of discussion around it, reskilling, the different skills that the workforce will need, obviously for OEMs. In the case, Juan Carlos, you mentioned like having chargers in the dealerships, which we're seeing more and more. And also for the service centers, there's a lot of demand, as I understand it, for technicians, right? And some of that retraining. I believe Dalton does also have service. And so I'm just curious, in terms of the workforce, whoever would want to comment on that, are you seeing, like your needs are not being quite met? Like, how are you going about the issue of getting the workforce, or reskilling and training the people that you need in your companies?
So yeah, we love our we call it the fixed operations part of our business, which is everything related to repair orders and body shops. We're one of the largest groups in terms of maintenance also here in Mexico, and it's very different, to be honest with you. The business model is going to change with EVs. The repair and maintenance is completely different for a electric vehicle than for an internal combustion engine. So we all need to start thinking that it's not just an item of transition. We first need to see that the market really wants to transition to that electrical side. But as we see that this is happening, we also have to be aware that there is a very, important part of the population that has jobs related to that service part. So that takes us to a little bit on a higher, more philosophical level to say, okay, this is where the industry is going. We need to adapt, but we also need to make sure that nobody's left behind, and that we need to figure out a way to transition this workforce to something that they can do. Now, I'm not saying that it's disappearing, because the service and maintenance is going to be required, but it's completely different what an internal combustion vehicle requires than what an electric vehicle. So it's interesting how deep it goes, because most of the, for example, repair and service orders that you get for an electric vehicle may be an update.
Software, right?
That could be a software, and then somebody's coding that update to make their components more efficient in other parts, right? So yeah, I think that I don't have a direct answer to that. I do think that, it depends on local markets. I think that the migration is going to be faster on the markets that are going to adopt the technology faster, and that we'll have to be all on the lookout to see what happens in those examples, and to determine if we're going to go in that same direction, or what best practices or adaptations we need to do from the avant-garde markets that are being much more aggressive in terms of adopting the EV as their #1 choice for mobility.
Yeah, thank you. Edward?
Yeah, what I would add to that, what Juan Carlos says was, he mentioned software. And sometimes those software updates will be done over the air without even coming into the dealership. We have that capability in the Endurance. The other difference, no oil changes, no air filters. Brakes wear less often because of the regenerative braking that most or nearly all electric vehicles have. But in terms of the workforce, the other reality is there are fewer parts in an electric vehicle, so the time to assemble them, one of the things you measure as an OEM in the product development and on the manufacturing side is how many man hours or person hours it takes to put together a vehicle. There are fewer parts, so there's fewer person hours to put together a vehicle. So that part is a little bit different as well. But all of those parts still need to be designed, engineered, tested, integrated in together. So, you know, it's more of a trade-off. So I would say software is a big growth area, Diana. And because when I started in the automotive industry about 30, let's just say 30 years ago, vehicles had like 3 computers in them, 3. All right, now they have 3 to 4 dozen. All right, electric vehicles have 3 to 4 dozen computers in them, and they all have to work together. They all have to, you know, they all have to be integrated. And you can't accept bugs the way you accept bugs in your laptops or in our cell phones. You know, so all of that work. So we try to convince students, technically inclined students, that the motor vehicle industry is a high-tech industry because of the amount of software that's involved. And a number of the user experiences and features are going to be delivered more and more by software and defined more and more by software. I mean, you know, the fundamentals of the vehicle is still there. You know, it still has to be safe, still has to accelerate, back up, turn around, go forward. You know, a crash in a vehicle is very different than a crash in a PC, so you have to manage the energy when vehicles collide. And there's still the safety and regulatory requirements, but if you're technically inclined students, think about the automotive industry. Okay.
Yeah. And Patricia, I'm curious at Blink, you know, another part of the discussion too is, at least in the US, is finding or training the people who can actually like install charging infrastructure, service the type of, you know, chargers as well. Is that something that you are seeing as a challenge at Blink in this market so far?
Actually, no. The design of our chargers right now are supposed to work as a remote control. We control everything from Phoenix, Arizona, and we have the control of the whole map in the world, that 25 countries that we already have operation. And we grow as a company working as a remote control. So for us right now, it is not a challenge.
Okay, that's good. Neva, anything to add on the workforce piece from your perspective?
From my perspective, from an OEM, we are seeing that right now like Diana said, we still have not so many people that are trained to do the maintenance and repairing for EV. As it's totally different, so we are doing in our own way to bring our technicians from China to do on-site training to all the customers that we have, and also in the future to all the dealers that we're going to work with, to make sure we can offer a very apple-to-apple maintenance and repairing, and also with the people that are able and that are trained to do this work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I would love to, I think we've touched on some of the, you know, the opportunities or the specific areas that we're seeing more of will be growing, that needs that each of the different parts of the value chain might have, and ways in which state governments also are preparing for that because they want to participate more into these opportunities. In addition to thinking about attracting investment, I think it's really important to think about the development of entrepreneurs, right? That are really focused on a lot of these business opportunities that the transition to electrification is opening up. And so I wonder if you all can share, you know, specific, if you were to advise an entrepreneur, they have ideas, they're trying to launch a business somewhere along the EV value chain, like what would be your advice in terms of these are the opportunities, these are the things that you need to think about, you know, what would that be, in terms of advice for young entrepreneurs trying to enter this market and to participate in this market? Whoever wants to go first, I'm not going to put anyone on the spot.
Maybe
Edward, you just volunteered you.
Oh, okay. I mean, you know, like any business opportunity, you have to look at what's the problem you're looking to solve and what was the customer. I completely agree with you mentioned it many times, and that's absolutely right. You have to start with the customer and what is the problem you're looking to solve for the customer. One of the major pain points to EV adoption is charging. You know, many people express dissatisfaction with charging, so that's an opportunity area. When you look at the growth of EV assembly operations, there's going to be a need for that supply chain to be local to where the vehicle plants are, because that is going to be an advantage from a cost standpoint for the OEM. So identify the pain points. Identify where your point of differentiation is as an entrepreneur. Where can you add value? Where the customer will value that, and surround yourself with a great team that can execute. Because, you know, ideas are a dime a dozen, but execution's everything.
Yeah, Juan Carlos.
I love what Edward said, and I also want to share that we started out as a jeans manufacturing company 75 years ago. So we believe in listening what the customers want. We stopped producing pants many years ago, and then we started developing industrial parks. And then we set up shop for one of the big OEMs and when they came to Mexico, and then we started with motorcycle dealerships. So I believe that transformation is something, and change is the only certainty that we have from here on. And for any business to thrive and any business to move on, we have to listen to what the customer wants. And that's as simple as that, and be able to actually transform to that. I'm going to be a little polemic here, but for example, we see this huge market of raising money, and this venture capital industry has created great storytellers, and great storytellers that are great at raising funds. But what I'm going to leave that as a question, a rhetorical question, is, are these managers that are listening to the customers down the road? And if so, they may have a chance to survive. But how many we're seeing? I believe that there's, you know, the fact that we're in this, let's say, money market, and everybody's so excited about raising funds to get new things going and everything being exponential. But you see out there also management teams that, as Edward said, are not really looking into what the person who's going to buy from you really needs. So that's a little bit my take on that.
Yeah, that's quite a pivot. I love that story. Neva?
Yeah,
Any
I
advice?
kind of share the same vision as well, Edward, because I think right now, as in Mexico, we are seeing not so many infrastructures for charging. So that should be a great opportunity for both all the OEMs and also for all the commercial parts of the chargers. And also, as everything, like for EV and also in the industry, everything is going digital and going intelligent. So I think this should be the future area of great opportunity as well in the industry.
Okay, so you're going to get a lot of competition, Patricia.
Yes, of course. The main objective that we have for Mexico is to be one company to give the chargers and to try to find the way to the public side and the private side work together, because it's impossible to find different sites to install a charger if the private and the public are working together. We need to work everybody together. We need to install the chargers and provide the OEMs the different electrical infrastructure to go from cells. How many cars do you sell a year?
40,000.
4,000. And to go and increase this number, because we want to really have as many chargers installed in Mexico that places we can find in the private and the public sites.
Yep. Great. So Fernando, let me come back to you. I've been letting you rest a little bit, but no more. So, you talked about the many companies in Chihuahua that you have now, your efforts, of course, to drive innovation, to really work to stay competitive. And can you just share and talk a little bit about how you're thinking about playing there? What are your main competitive advantages that you're really looking to leverage to be able to, to remain competitive in that new value chain?
Okay, yes, well, I will say first and foremost, our first competitive advantage will be our people, our talented people. We have a culture for more than 3 generations working on the industrial sector in our state. We are really working really hard with the private sector to improve and strengthen, let's say, that advantage. It's really, really important. As someone mentioned before, there are basically 3 R's here, which is reskilling, retooling, and retraining. And on the labor side, the reskilling and retraining is key. As Ed mentioned before, an ICE car has around 100 moving parts. An electric vehicle has just 3. There is a reduction on the number of part numbers on an electric car from an ICE, which from around 30,000 to 20,000. So that will put, let's say, a challenge on the number of suppliers that will, let's say, will be on the new reality, let's say. So really, we need to work really hard to train our workforce on these new capabilities. The second is the industrial base that we already have in our state. And what I'll mention is really interesting, because what we are seeing here is this kind of relationship that has been going on for quite so many years, on which we have a facility in Ohio, and then we have a supplier in Ciudad Juarez, in Chihuahua, which is Foxconn. And Foxconn is moving from being, let's say, an electronics supplier to being basically a technology-driven company that wants to be part of the new EV reality. So I guess we need to really leverage that kind of relationships between the companies that we have in our state, and also understand which ones are the ones that are investing in the future. Luckily for us, we already have quite a few suppliers located through our state that are really our supplier to Tesla, are really suppliers to Lordstown, and some other companies like Lucid or Rivian. So the future, I would say, is interesting. The third one will be our location. We are right now in the middle of this new reality between the biggest investments in the southeast, southwest part of the U.S., and also between the industrial center in Mexico. So we hope that will bring a new investments in this kind of reality. So as we have, let's say, analyzed what is going on in Chihuahua these days, one of the key issues that we are really trying to make happen is that in the past, for some reason, there was not an interest to bring full OEM into our state. And right now we want to change that reality, because right now we have, in this new reality, let's say, we have the battery, the powertrain, the cables, and basically that's it. I mean, the frame, right? And basically the integration of all that. So someone asked me more than once, what happened to Chihuahua? Why don't you ever have this kind of a big facility into our state? And this is something on which we are really working on. And I will say the last, I mean, not the last, but the last ones of our competitive advantage will be our private sector. We really have in our state a really strong private sector that is helping us to drive this transition with innovation to these new technologies. And also, we are a binational community on which we are really interlinked with El Paso, with Las Cruces, with some of the parts with our border states in the U.S., and also across our state in Chihuahua, Juarez. So I will say these are basically our main competitive advantages: labor, location, our industrial base, and our private sector. So luckily for us, we'll be working in the very near future to put together all this strategy of work. And last but not least, I would just like to say that one of the commitments that we have right now is working with the University of Michigan on helping us making all this transition, and has been really a good point of inflection for us, really, to see what is it that we need to do, what is it that we need to do.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you. All right, so we definitely are going to have some time for Q&A, I believe. Yes? 1 minute. One question. Okay. Questions?
Who's the lucky guy?
Yeah, who's
This
the
one
lucky?
down here.
If you could please just introduce yourself and then indicate for whom the question is. That would
Yes,
be great.
my name is Gustavo de la Fuente. I'm the executive director of an organization called the San Diego-Tijuana Smart Border Coalition. The question is for Edward Hightower. Edward, you were talking about commercial vehicles, commercial fleets. In California, we have a situation brewing with advanced fleets and the regulation for advanced fleets, meaning that a lot of the drayage trucks that exist on the border that cross the Otay Mesa port of entry end up going to Long Beach and LA. And the issue there is that the industry is very fragmented on the Mexican side of the border and even on the US side. So the price point for these small business owners to purchase these electric vehicles over the next 2 or 3, 4 years to abide by California law is going to be quite challenging. So what do you recommend there? Are you looking into that? Is that something that your company is looking at? It's like finding the right price point for these small companies.
Yes. Yep. What class of vehicle are you typically speaking about? Are you talking about Class 8 semi-trailers, 7 and 8 semi-trailers, or are you talking about smaller light vehicles?
No, a little larger.
Yeah.
A little larger,
Yeah.
not the lighter vehicles. But
Right. So our vehicle is more Class 2B. It's still considered a light vehicle, but the problem is the same. There's still a price premium to move into an electric vehicle. So one of the things that customers need to be encouraged to consider is the lifetime cost, the energy cost over time. And finance companies and fleet management companies are getting involved in this as well to assure that there's a end-of-life use for the vehicle and maybe a residual value that is somewhat guaranteed. Leasing, as leasing becomes more prevalent, that certainly makes the vehicle more affordable. And really, with the maintenance schedule being very different, 50,000 miles on an electric vehicle is not the same as 50,000 miles on an ICE vehicle from both a depreciation standpoint and from a maintenance standpoint. So it's a bit of market education. It's a bit of a broader portfolio of products coming out there that can serve more needs, because the portfolio, and I don't mean just our company, but in the whole market, is skewed a little bit more towards the higher cost, higher price vehicles. And it's been some of the higher priced brands that have had more success. But over time, when you look at the cycle plans of what all the other OEMs are doing, they are building lower and lesser expensive vehicles. As battery costs come down, that will help. And as customers, as OEMs offer smaller battery packs, for example, not every vehicle needs a 100 kilowatt hour battery packs. In some cases, if your drive time or drive cycle in a day is 50 miles and you don't need 200 miles of range, so different product choices being available to the customer and market education, those will help those.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Well, all right then. We want to thank, on behalf of the U.S.-Mexico Foundation, Diana Paez for trusting in the North Capital Forum, all our amazing panelists on this pressing topic. And we invite you to join us in just 10 minutes for the next session that is going to be about soft power and public diplomacy, hosted by the Meridian Institute. And please, a big round of applause to our panelists.
Thank you so much.